Coming to you from Jerusalem. Good evening. Defense Minister Ehud Barak today ordered that all crossings into the Gaza Strip remain closed. That was Israel's response to yesterday's Qassam rocket fire on the western Negev by Palestinian terrorists. According to the truce agreement, the crossings were to have opened this morning to allow an increased number of trucks to enter Gaza, carrying food and emergency goods into the impoverished area. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert described Tuesday's rocket attack as a blatant violation of the ceasefire. The Islamic Jihad took responsibility for the rocket fire, claiming it was in response to the killing of 2 terrorist operatives in Nablus during an IDF raid. Hamas called today's closure of the crossings a violation of the truce. Hamas officials said they remain committed to the ceasefire, but will not act as Israel's policemen against other terrorist factions in Gaza.
This is a great violation from the Israeli occupation to the calm understandings, and we are Hamas. Our call for the Egyptian side in order to exert more and more pressure and to play an important role to enforce the Israeli occupation, to lift all shape of violation committed after establishment of the calm between the Palestinians and the Israeli occupation by the Egyptians' effort.
Well, it was all set to be a high-noon confrontation between Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and his Defense Minister Ehud Barak. This morning in the Knesset, the Labour and Kadima Knesset factions approved the compromise deal that averted today's planned vote on early elections. The deal was struck at the 11th hour. And until late yesterday, opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu believed that his time had come. Eli Wargelanter has the story.
This morning in the Knesset, the Labour and Kadima factions approved the last-minute compromise deal that averted today's planned vote on early elections. The deal was struck at the 11th hour, and until late yesterday, opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu believed that this time it would really happen. The first step toward dissolving the Knesset would be approved, the government would fall, and the Likud would at last return to power. But it was not to be. In the early hours of this morning, following feverish late-night negotiations at the Tel Aviv apartment of Labour leader Ehud Barak, the compromise deal was struck and signed. The negotiators for Olmert and Barak, Eitan Kabel and Shalom Simchon from Labour, and Tzachi Hanegbi of Kadima, hammered out the agreement, which calls for leadership primaries in Kadima no later than September 25th. In exchange, Labour said it would not support the early election bill due to come to the floor today, and as a result, Likud MK Silvan Shalom was forced to withdraw the bill and put it on hold indefinitely. Shalom lashed out at Ehud Barak, charging that the self-styled Doberman turned out to be a poodle whose tail was wagged by his master, Ehud Olmert. But Barak won the approval of all but 2 of the Labour MKs for his maneuver. He can now claim to have forced Kadima to set a date for its leadership primaries against the will of Prime Minister Olmert. As for Olmert himself, he has won yet another reprieve, 3 more months in power, and according to sources close to the Prime Minister, Olmert really believes that on July 17th, the cross-examination of Morris Talansky will drastically change the public perception of Olmert's alleged crimes. At the same time, Tzachi Hanegbi is reported to have told Barak last night that Olmert will almost certainly not be a contender in the Kadima primaries. Eli Wargelanter, IBA News.
Staying with politics, and 40 Knesset members signed a petition which obliged Prime Minister Olmert to sit through an entire plenary session this afternoon in which a parade of opposition legislators listed the reasons why this government has reached the end of the road. Opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu chose to lash out at the Kadima-Labour deal, charging that Ehud Barak spat in the face of the Israeli public. Likud faction chairman Gidon Saar called the Labour Party a bunch of wet rags and was forced by Knesset Speaker Dalia Itzik to leave the podium. At the end of the session, Olmert fired back, saying to the opposition, the reason you oppose this government is that you do not want peace. Olmert said the release of kidnapped soldiers is his top priority and his toughest decision to make. Our negotiations with the PA, Olmert said, are the most serious Israel has conducted in years. Omri Sharon, the son of former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, was released from Masyau prison today after serving 4 months of his 7-month sentence. His incarceration was reduced by 1/3 for good behaviour. The Likud MK was convicted of illegal financing of his father's election campaign. Sharon will now be on parole for 2 months. He was greeted outside the prison by his brother Gilad and was expected to go directly to the Tel HaShomer Medical Center to visit his comatose father. Well, the spectacular Cords Bridge at the entrance to Jerusalem will be officially inaugurated in an elaborate celebration tonight. Among those in attendance will be the award-winning Spanish architect of the bridge, Santiago Calatrava. IBA's Aaron Weiner headed over to the new landmark this morning for a pre-opening press conference and brought us this report.
Praise him with the harp and the lyre. That is the verse in Psalms that inspired the harp-shaped Cords Bridge, symbolizing King David, who founded Jerusalem 3,000 years ago.
Jerusalem is also a modern city, and it is a city of our time. We have all in mind the old city of Jerusalem, a city between walls with a middle-aged character, but indeed Jerusalem is a city with hundreds of thousands of inhabitants. It's a city who is growing continuously, and in my opinion, also it has a very dynamic and beautiful character. And I think this type of construction belongs to a city like that.
The centerpiece of the multi-spar cable-stayed bridge is a 118-meter-high mast, and the angled cantilever tower consists of a single pylon, counterbalancing the 360-meter span with lengths of cable. The unique 4,200-ton bridge isn't intended to serve as only an aesthetic addition to the city, but will provide a pedestrian bridge now and the Jerusalem light rail lines in 2 years' time. Israelis express a wide range of views about the new structure.
It's beautiful. I think it's help for the beauty of the city, you know. It's a beautiful architecture for Jerusalem, and it's also better for the people.
At a cost of 220 million shekels, the construction has not been without controversy, however.
All the money what you give for this, you can give for the people not have enough to eat. This I think.
What I can say is that's a lot of money. I hope it's well used. I hope it'll serve the people well.
Others simply fail to share the designer's vision.
I think it sucks. It's ugly.
That's what you think.
It's just a giant phallic symbol with strings.
Many expect that the bridge will become a landmark symbol of Jerusalem in and of itself.
One bystander said that your bridge may become the Eiffel Tower of Jerusalem. What do you think about that?
Well, I like it.
This is Aaron Weiner for IBA News.
On to less happy news. And a mass rally is planned for this evening at Mitzpeh Hila in the Galilee, the home of the Shalit family. Hundreds of Israelis gathered across from the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem last night to protest what they said was the intolerably slow pace at which the government is negotiating the release of captured soldier Gilad Shalit. Today marks exactly 2 years since the kidnapping of Shalit in a cross-border raid from Gaza. Shalit's father Noam told the gathering that the government needs to speed up negotiations before it's too late. Shalit warned that if the foot-dragging goes on too much longer, it will be too late to save his son. Yesterday, Olmert met with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak and received his pledge not to reopen the Rafah border crossing with Gaza until Shalit is set free. Prime Minister Olmert held a security cabinet session today on the two kidnapped Israeli soldiers, Ehud Goldwasser and Eldad Regev. Olmert said that this Sunday the full cabinet will vote on the prisoner exchange deal with Hezbollah, even if the military rabbinate has not yet completed its investigation of the condition of the two kidnapped soldiers. Cabinet Secretary Ovad Yecheskel confirmed that the cabinet vote will take place on Sunday. The Prime Minister's office today denied reports that Olmert asked the army to suspend its investigation into the condition of Eldad Regev and Ehud Goldwasser. Ben Gurion Airport today dealt with the simulated crash of a passenger jet, but late yesterday the tension was all too real, just seconds before French President Nicolas Sarkozy and his wife prepared to take off at the end of their 3-day visit to Israel. IBA's Elisha Rabin has the details.
What some feared to be an assassination attempt turned out to be a high-profile suicide. A border police officer allegedly shot himself yesterday while guarding the farewell ceremony for French President Nicolas Sarkozy at Ben Gurion Airport. The shot was barely audible over the military band serenading Sarkozy's departure, but bodyguards who heard the shot quickly put security procedures into action. Officers from the Shin Bet agency hurried Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and President Shimon Peres to a bulletproof car, while French security rushed Sarkozy and his wife, Carla, on board their plane. But the French president maintained composure throughout the incident, stopping at the top of his plane's gangway to wave goodbye to his hosts. Officials ruled out moments later the possibility that the shot was indeed an assassination attempt, and the all-clear was given for Olmert to bid farewell to Sarkozy. The Prime Minister boarded Sarkozy's plane to let the French first couple know what had happened and to say goodbye. Meanwhile, the family of the dead soldier thinks it's impossible that their son killed himself. The soldier's father said from the family's home in the Druze village of Beit John that his son had no reason to commit suicide. He was happily married with 2 kids. The family of the soldier believe their son's gun may have misfired, and they're pushing for an in-depth investigation into the matter. The soldier had been serving in the border police for the past 8 years after finishing his military service in the elite Givati unit. For IBA News, I'm Elisha Rabin.
Well, back now to today's political developments in the Knesset. IBA's Eli Wargelenter asked MKs from across the political spectrum whether Labour was outmanoeuvred by Kadima or perhaps vice versa.
I think that we forced Kadima to start the process, which at the end they will have early election. They were against it, and the mere fact that Olmert was not ready until yesterday night to speak about a specific date, but talk very not in specific terms about September, showed to me that it didn't mean that primaries will take place on September. And what I've heard also from a member of Knesset Hanegbi was that, yes, they start, but they start very easily, firstly about the regulations, and when the time will come and they will be ripe and ready to decide, then they will decide upon the date. Now we have a date and we have a process, which is that no later than the 25th of September, there will be a new chairman of the Kadima party. But still, there is even no one sentence that mentions our basic demand, that it will not be Olmert.
In effect, though, the Labour Party, which beforehand the chairman Barak had said that the Prime Minister can't be running the government on the one hand and defending himself against criminal charges on the other, what you have done now is to allow that to happen, that you've allowed him to continue as Rosh Memshalah.
Yeah, but even if we would have gone for the motion today and voted for earlier election, it would have taken a long period of time also. There is no way today, according to the Israeli democracy, to cause the Prime Minister unless he volunteers to step out of his office. And any process, will it be the process with voting for earlier election or any other process, unless one scenario. And the scenario is that our ministers will resign, and next week we will vote non-confidence against the government, and then after 3 months will be an election. But any other process will cause Olmert, or will cause a situation that Olmert will stay as Prime Minister at least until the end of September, and even 3 months in addition.
Actually, the gaps between the Kadima position and the Labour position were not that great. There was a lot of mistrust, and this was, in my judgment, the reason for the bloated political crisis. And now that we're over the crisis, we can move back to the important issues rather than the political issues.
But some are saying that because it's making Prime Minister Olmert a lame duck until September primary, that he cannot make any political governmental move on any track, in any direction.
First of all, Olmert so far did not announce whether or not he's going to run. And secondly, sometimes lame ducks are the most powerful because they do not have to take into account political calculations. So I think one should, and I trust the Prime Minister's judgment that in questions such as how to deal with Gaza and the Hezbollah and Iran, of course, he will do what's best for the country. Of course, it would be more difficult to move forward with peace negotiations and more long-term agendas.
In your opinion, do you think there's a good chance that he would run again as head of Kadima?
It's too early to tell. I think it depends on the outcome of the cross-examination. in mid-July, and then the Prime Minister would make his own assessment.
Of course, we are very disappointed, like most of the people in Israel. But they outmaneuvered themselves, or actually the Labour Party was outmaneuvered by Olmert. Olmert showed today that he is the biggest crook in Israel. Barak asked for his resignation immediately, and the deal was that Olmert is ready to be re-elected by Kadima in September.
Is that a chance? Is that a possibility that he could be re-elected
Yes,
in September?
Of course. I know with confidence that if he will not be indicted until September, he's going to run and also to win. So what Barak really got is that Olmert is ready to reassure his position. As this is, of course, ridiculous. Olmert destroying Ehud Barak and the Labour Party altogether. But meanwhile, our democracy is in the worst shape ever.
What can the government do in the next 3 months on any track?
The real fear is that now Olmert will try rapidly to go for dramatic decisions in war and peace, either to go to some military operation in Gaza or elsewhere, or to give back the Golan Heights, or to make rapid peace with the Palestinians. This is, of course, totally wrong.
And joining me now in the studio to discuss the political situation in the wake of the Olmert-Barak compromise is Mitchell Barak, political consultant, former aide to Ariel Sharon and Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you so much, Mitchell, for being our guest today. Well, I think Netanyahu really thought this time it was going to happen. It was so close, and yet...
Well, it was so close, but even if it passed in the first reading, it would still take a period of time before anything could really happen.
Except that Olmert would have fired the Labour ministers.
He might have
but
fired,
it didn't
he might
happen.
have not. It didn't happen. But
Okay.
I think it's clear that this is the beginning of the end.
You think so?
I think so, because and Olmert is going to have to run against other people in the party. And he may lose. He may win, he may lose, but his leadership
You think he'll run?
is being challenged. I don't think he's going to step away so easily. I mean, I think it's not only the cross-examination on July 19th that's going to be relevant, but he has 4 or 5 other open investigations. And one of them at any point could come down with an indictment. If it comes down with an indictment, then he's in a little bit of trouble.
Right, absolutely. Well, it seems that Olmert was the winner today. He was granted a temporary reprieve. What about Ehud Barak? How did he come out of this?
Well, he's still defense minister, so he's a winner also. I mean,
Okay.
I think a lot of the members of Knesset were concerned with keeping the mix the way it was, and they did that. Most people who are in the Knesset don't want to go for elections. I think the losers, to a certain extent, are the Israeli citizens, because what we've seen over the course of the past year or so is Israelis would like better leadership. All around. Leadership that seems to take responsibility, leadership that looks for the best of the country in all the decisions they make. And I think that people are getting the impression that the leadership here is basically in power just to keep themselves in power.
Right, I wonder where they get that idea. What about Tzipi Livni? It seems she's a big winner because she will now be going to primaries, which is what she wanted all along, and Olmert was forced to agree to this.
It's true. Tzipi Livni is going to go for the primary, for the leadership of Kadima, but she's also going to have to probably fight against Avi Dichter. She's going to have to fight against Shaul Mofaz, both of whom are very strong candidates, and I'm not sure that she has a real grassroots support in the party. I think within the leadership of the party, she's popular, but grassroots support, I think, is going to go to Shaul Mofaz and Avi Dichter. And both of them are going to seem tougher on security.
Right.
And she's going to have trouble convincing people that she's good on security.
Okay, and very quickly, even though it's a very broad subject, and that is, it is becoming harder and harder to govern this country because of elections every year or year and a half. What's the solution? Presidential system?
I don't know. Maybe the system that was where you had 2 votes was a better system because maybe that gets better candidates in. I think what we're seeing now is, as part of the process to stay in power, you have other things that are running alongside in order to keep those things in power. Mainly talk about a strike against Iran, talk about a quick peace treaty with Syria, a quick final status with the Palestinians.
Right.
And I think the real motivation for some of these things to do them in such a quick time frame is to stay in power and to make sure that the coalition stays.
Okay.
And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the summer.
Absolutely. And I'm afraid we're out of time. So, Mitchell Barak, thank you so much for being in the studio today. Well, turning to arts news now. The International Young Composers Competition reaches its final stage tonight. The contest is named after the late Daniel Amichai Marcus, who was killed in a traffic accident 15 years ago. More than 40 works were submitted to the Ra'anana Symphonette from around the world, from composers in Australia, New Zealand, Spain, Italy, France, and surprisingly enough, Iran. Rafi Kadishzon will preside over the Ra'anana Symphonette this evening when they perform the 4 selected works at the Arts Centre in Ra'anana tonight at 8 o'clock. And entrance is free.
For the violin. It's not like holding a tuba or hitting the drums.
Briefly in local money matters, shares were up on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange while the shekel weakened against all major foreign currencies. Here are the late afternoon numbers. Taking a look at the weather, and temperatures will rise over the next few days with a break in the heat expected only on the weekend. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours. And that's all the time we have for today. Join us again tomorrow at the same time for all the latest news from Israel. Until then, have a great evening. Shalom from Jerusalem.